streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Old Satan's that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Lovely.
Thank you, Marianne Mangini. And Marianne Mangini is a well-known jazz singer here in Western Pennsylvania. And I know that she's available for music lessons, for piano lessons, I think singing lessons. And she certainly plays a lot of different shows and concerts around here in Western PA. And Ellie, if you could share her website with everybody, it's mariannemangini.com, just in case they want to get in touch with her and thank her for kind of volunteering her beautiful voice for the Veterans Breakfast Club. Once again, this is VBC at Home Live, and this is the Veterans Breakfast Club. This is our Monday night program for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. And I just have a couple announcements before we get into the stories. Number one is, if you're available, I think you'll definitely want to join us on Wednesday, June 24th at 1 p.m. for our VBC at Home Live. That will be our Korean War edition. And on Wednesday at 1 p.m., we will be commemorating the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War. On June 25th, 1950, 75,000 members of the North Korean People's Army poured across the 38th parallel into South Korea, which was a U.S. ally, and tried to launch a war that would reunify both Koreas under communist rule. The United States responded within days of the attack, and there were troops by July. There were American troops on the ground, and for the next 3 years, there was just a horrific bloody war waging up and down the Korean peninsula. So on Wednesday, we're going to have 3 veterans of that war join us and share their stories. Well, Bob Harbula, John Yates, Burt Kennedy, and others will be joining us. You'll be able to ask some questions. They'll be giving firsthand testimony of what it was like 70 years ago. Certainly Bob Harbula's perspective. He saw a lot of action, and I'm really looking forward to it. So please do join us if you can, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Also on Thursday at 9 a.m., we have our VBC coffee hour. This is something that we do every week. And it's an informal conversation that we have, a lot of laughter, a few tears every once in a while. But I think the word that sums up what we do on Thursday mornings is just kind of fellowship. We just kind of get together and talk for about an hour. It's please do join us if you can. Everybody's invited. There's no formal program, but we do hear a lot of stories. There's a lot more give and take on Thursday mornings than we have here on Monday nights. Well, let's dig into the subject tonight. I know that there are many people still in the waiting room, still people being slowly let in from the waiting room. But I think we should get started because we have a heck of a big subject tonight. The topic this evening is race in the military, perspectives of African-American veterans. Many of you know that I'm a historian first. I was trained and worked as a historian for many years before I got involved with the Veterans Breakfast Club. And so I think it goes without saying that we're living in historic times, not only because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of what happened to this country. 4 weeks ago today, George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police, and that prompted protests and, of course, some civil unrest. But I think from a historian's perspective, what I see happening is a really remarkable awakening of what I think should be called a new civil rights movement. And you know that we don't do politics here with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We are not steadfastly nonpartisan, non-political. We strongly discourage political speech at our events because we really want to have our programs. We want to focus on what brings people together and not what divides us. And politics these days certainly divides us a great deal. At the same time, however, over the past 12 years since I've been with the Veterans Breakfast Club, I've certainly noticed that the stories that we get from African-American veterans, veterans of color, women veterans, differ qualitatively from the stories that we get from white male veterans. And over the past 2 weeks, I've probably had a dozen conversations with veterans, with African-American veterans, particularly I've gotten in touch with. And the stories that they've told me, in candor, really have taken me aback, I think. The stories of racial discrimination and racism in the military. And I think it's the ubiquity, it's the unanimity of these stories that suggest to me that these aren't isolated incidents, but rather there's been a pattern of racism in the military, and still is today. There's a saying that we hear at the Veterans Breakfast Club, Paris Island saying that goes that in the Marine Corps, there is no black, there is no white, there's only shades of green. And I think that's true to an extent in the military. I think the military experience does break down racial divisions in some very profound and fascinating ways. It's true to an extent, but only to an extent. I think race in the military is a vast, complicated, much more complicated subject than I had originally assumed, and with a lot of different wrinkles and permutations. So we'll only be scratching the surface tonight in our conversation about race in the military, but helping us guide us through this fascinating conversation are 6 wonderful veterans, and I'll name them quickly and then we'll dig in and really get them to start sharing their experiences. We have Lamont Gourdine, who is a recently retired Navy commander, Naval Academy graduate, 25 years in the Navy. We have Haya Eason, who is a Marine who served in the Marines in the 1980s. We have James Martin, who served in the Marine Corps for 15 years between 2000 and 2015. We have Louise Walker, who served in the Navy. We have Ariana Hunter, who served in the Army. And we also have Rosetta Burke, who served 35 years in the Army and became the first woman Assistant Adjutant General in the National Guard nationwide. She's really a pioneer is the word for Rosetta Burke. And I look forward to hearing from all our guests today. And I thought we would kind of go through what each of our guests has to say, and then definitely have time for questions and for kind of discussion. And I would have put on the spot Lamont Gourdine. His name here appears as Henry Gourdine. Let me spotlight you, Lamont. How are you?
Hey, Todd. How you doing? I'm doing great, and happy Father's Day to all of the fathers that are out there. Hope you had a wonderful day yesterday.
Thank you for joining us, Lamont. Is there anything wrong with the name Henry, by the way?
No, that's just my government name.
Oh, that's your government.
That's the that is the family name. As my grandmother in Gullah speak, she would say I'm the triai. So the third in that lineage, and Todd, you and I had to kind of talk about my family background, going back to the French Huguenots and all of that stuff like that too. So
yeah. Oh, I mean,
it has a history.
Man after my own heart with the history in your family. There's something else that you taught me in our conversation. You directed me to a hot mic incident that happened a few weeks ago when a man named Scott Bethman, who is on the board of the Naval Academy Alumni Board,
Formerly on the board.
Formerly on the board. He was a retired Navy captain, and he was recorded on Facebook Live having a conversation with his wife about his thoughts on African American and women cadets at the Naval Academy and in the Navy generally. And it was vicious. I mean, what he had to say, he used racial epithets, and racial slurs, including the N-word. And it shocked me to hear, a retired Navy captain who serves on the Naval Academy Alumni Board express such racist thoughts. I was shocked. Were you?
Todd, the one thing I'll say is first of all, I'm honored to be, even invited to come and speak. However, I'm not honored at the subject that we have to continuously keep talking about. And, and I hope that, this conversation helps to at least peel back the onion a little bit more on the fact that there is some systemic challenges within the military, and but I always have a glimmer of hope that through conversation and through actions we can definitely get better at how we look at the situation. So so just kind of quickly in my career, I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time because there's a lot more esteemed people on this panel than I am. But just in terms of hearing Mr. Bethman speak, it was almost kind of unfortunately kind of a confirmation sometimes of, okay, there are some people that are biased against me. And I think the thing that hurts me the most about what was said is, like you said, Todd, this guy was a Navy captain, 06, so a colonel in some of the other branches. So he served, nearly 3 decades in the military and having touch points with a whole lot of minorities and women. So if you look at the span of his career from being an ensign to a Navy captain from 01 to 06, the amount of fit reps, evals that he had to write, all of those things. And so if he had those thoughts with his wife sitting down in the kitchen in the quiet of his home, which he thought, to be able to go on a racial rant and, to do that, how many times has he pretty much been, biased in the way that he graded out individuals in terms of rank if someone came up to him? So kind of in my own experience, the one thing that, and it's good that I'm out of the Navy now because they probably, I don't know if they necessarily kick me out for saying what I'm about to say, but I worked in diversity for the Navy a good part of my career. And one of the things that I did is after my first operating squadron, I finished pretty high in my squadron, and I was out of about 50 pilots. We were blessed to actually have 3 African-American naval aviators in the same squadron. We were an anomaly, unfortunately. But the rest of my career, I was usually a one of in terms of the African-American community, because in terms of African-Americans are just minorities, just brown people, women in aviation is just kind of few and far between. Well, long story short, so after getting done with my first operational squadron, I was offered a chance to either go down to Pensacola, Florida, back to go down for training, or go back to the Naval Academy, because at that time we had what was called the 12-12-5 initiative, which was essentially putting a quota on 12% African American, 12% Hispanic, 5% Asian Pacific Islander, Native American population for the military, which they got rid of. But during that time, the big challenge was from the Chief of Naval Operations was, hey, we need to increase diversity, and we need to do it also at the service academies. So they see me, hey, Black guy, you went to service academy. Hey, you're not going to Pensacola. You're going to go back up to Annapolis because we want to increase the numbers. So after being there for a couple of years, we had the highest class of minorities to ever come through the Naval Academy at that time, and also the highest amount of African Americans to select aviation, because people like to go with people that they see look like themselves. So we had that, and it was a great win. So when I got back as a department head, so kind of middle management in the squadron, after getting all of these accolades from these 4-star admirals, all the stuff like that, hey, good job doing this, doing that. You help decrease diversity in the military. After doing that, and then going back to an operational squadron, when it came up for time to get our fitness reports, our evaluations, I went to my commanding officer and said, hey, what do I need to do to be the number one? So he said, you need to get your joint professional military education, get your JPME, get that certification. You need to, hey, I want to get someone in the Naval Academy from this squadron. I want to do this. I want to do that. So I was like, Roger that. So did all of that, and we were one of the top maintenance departments. I was the maintenance officer. We had one of the top maintenance departments in the entire United States Navy and aviation that year. But when it came back around time for fitness reports for our fit reps, I get the number 2, and I swore that I was on an episode of Punk'd at the time. because I was just like, okay, I did every single freaking thing that you asked me to do. And on top of that, the guy that I was competing against had been in what we call a class alpha mishap. So he darn near killed someone in an aviation mishap, and he got the number one. So I literally, a guy that darn near killed someone got the number one over me when I did exactly everything I did. I got someone in the service. I got someone in the Naval Academy for him. I was the head of diversity for the squadron, but I was told the reason why I got the number two is because I went back to do admissions at the Naval Academy, and I said, well, I was mandated to go do that because of diversity. And he was like, well, it's not a production job, so I'm not going to give you the number one because this other guy did a production job, but he almost killed someone, but he did a production job.
You know, Lamont, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to say that the story that you're sharing, and I want people to remember that Lamont is a 25-year Navy veteran. You probably bleed Navy blue. You know, when you're pricked with a needle, you're a graduate of the Naval Academy. You've had a wonderful career. You retired as a commander. You know, so you're not a disgruntled Navy veteran by any means.
No.
And what really supports this story is that it's so common. And the Pentagon itself and the Department of Veterans Affairs has just released data that shows how common it is. African Americans amount to about 15% of the U.S. military. Ethnic and racial minorities about 35%, but their numbers are way lower proportionally in the officer corps and in command positions.
Yeah,
this is a really common thing that you're describing, and it's a severe form of racial discrimination. But I want you to talk about. Would you mind also? I hope I'm not throwing you off track here. I'm also struck by the stories of, I guess, what, you know, like my daughters would call microaggressions that you experienced in the military. There are things that aren't really like formal discrimination, but you become a victim of stereotypes, like when you're walking with your flight suit with your mechanic and you're the pilot. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, you know, I born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. So I was just real quick. I was heading down to what we call the Fleet Flying down in Pensacola, Florida, and we stopped to get gas in Greenville, South Carolina. And so myself, I get off, and my mechanic, we call it air crewman. My air crewman, I'll just say his name is Dan. I won't give his full name, but nice country boy from the back trees of Georgia. Great guy, but definitely in terms of the way that he grew up was drastically different from the way that I grew up. I'll just put it like that. But actually, at the time, we were flying down to Tuskegee, Alabama, and they have what's called the Tuskegee Airmen Fly-In. So if for those of you just kind of quick with the Tuskegee Airmen, you know, being an African American naval aviator, those guys were definitely the trailblazers for African Americans in aviation. So we were actually heading down to that. So we stop in Greenville, South Carolina, and I pretty much, for naval aviators, you have your rank on your shoulders, and for the mechanics, your air crew, they don't wear any rank on their uniform. It just shows up on their name tag. And so I get ready to walk in off the aircraft, and we're walking in to go fuel up. And so the white guy that's in there is just like, he comes up to me. He was like, "Hey, I need to get your gas card." And I was just like, well, I don't have it. He was like, "Aren't you the mechanic?" And my buddy Dan, he looks at me and is like, "But sir, you got rank on your uniform." I was like, "But I guess that doesing matter." He was like, "Well, ain't that guy right there the pilot?" It was like, "No, I's the pilot." It's just one of those things where it's just a bias. Even if you're in your uniform, both of us are in flight suits. Mine has rank on it, his doesn't, and both of us walk into a room. I get perceived as being the mechanic.
Now, you said your mechanic Dan, who probably grew up without really talking with or socializing with African Americans, may have socialized with African Americans for the first time in the military. Mm-hmm. Was this an education for him?
Oh yeah, and one of the things that we did on the flight from Greenville down in Tuskegee, we kind of chuckled about it a little bit on the aircraft. I was like, yeah, you're actually going to be, it's going to be a little bit funny for you for the first, couple of minutes, because you're going to actually be the minority in a room of a whole bunch of African-American aviators from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps, and old mechanics and stuff like that. But I mean, it was an all-inclusive event. Yeah. But when we got down there, he got to see he got to see the microaggression that was against me, but also kind of see the beauty of, hey, African-American naval aviators just in general are doing really good things. And so I will say to this day, that guy, I will, if he calls me right now and we're on this conference and he says, hey, I need help right now, I'm going to get off of this conference.
You're off the call.
I think that helped us become thicker than thieves, because we got to see a little bit of each other's perspectives. And so I think that's one of the bright spots that's why I think I still have hope for the fact that, even though there's craziness that's going on, we have the opportunity to change as long as we are open-minded and we figure out that there's, that everyone has something to offer. I mean, there's idiots on all sides of the fence, but if you can understand the good in people and respect them for that, then I think it goes a long way.
And I think that's why I love that story, is that there's a little bit of hope in it. Can I ask you, before we move on to Louise, I want to talk to Louise next, but before we do, I do want to ask you, did you ever have conversations with higher ranking, commanders, admirals, Marine generals about this issue? And were they interested? Did they engage you on it?
Yeah. I was an aide to, I think I told you about this. I was an aide to Admiral Greenert, John Greenert. He's actually from Butler, Pennsylvania. And so got a chance to go up to Pittsburgh, and I got a chance to, when I was working for him, talking diversity with the 100 Black men in the Pennsylvania area and the NAACP, and this was back in 2007, 2008 timeframe. And so the senior leadership of the services, they understand diversity and the impact it can have. Unfortunately, once you get past that rung, you get down to the 06s. Thank you, Mr. Bethman. And you get to like middle management. There's still a little bit of a good old boy network. And it's just like, oh, well, yeah, I know they're talking about that diversity stuff. I'll kind of figure this out if I become a senior guy. But right now, no, I'm still comfortable with what I'm comfortable with. And I mean, and everybody wants to go back to their comfort zones.
Right.
So I think it's, the unfortunate part of that is that, people tend to go back to their comfort zones, and, change is tough, and change doesn't necessarily happen overnight. So, but I think that, with a lot more of the studies that are coming out, with the temperature of the country right now, I think this is even though it's unfortunate, I think it's also a golden opportunity for us to have the dialogue and to try to figure these things out, put them on the forefront, and get at the problems. Yeah.
Wonderful, Lamont. Thank you for joining us. I hope you don't go away, because I think we're going to be calling on you again.
I'm sticking around.
Great. As a conversation. I would love to have Louise Walker here. Louise, there you are. Hello, Louise.
Yes,
good to see you.
Same here.
Good to see you. I love your shirt. Love more.
Yes, love more, live free. That's
free.
Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of your earrings. Sorry, Tad. I just found that.
Louise, I was struck when we talked the other day about how, I guess I expected implicit racism, or, indirect racism, covert racism where it's hidden, it's not. But you experienced like overt, explicit racism when you joined the Navy. And what year was it? The 1980s?
1986 is when I went in, and the racism began in Mississippi when I stationed in there in 1987, 88.
Was that your first time in the Deep South?
Yes.
Was it an eye-opening experience, huh?
Yes, because I'm coming from a little town up here of Clerton, where we didn't experience none of that racism. We were just one melting pot. So when I got to Mississippi, I was really struck when the first time someone called me the N-word, and it just so happened to be a civilian that was working with us in the military.
They called you the N-word.
Yes. And here's the other bad thing about it is those who know in the Navy, when the plane is flying, it has this engine, it got a long cable on it. It's called the arresting hook. And that's where people trained at. I'm in Meridian, Mississippi. So I remember we was holding the cable so that they could hook it back into the machine because we was doing preventive maintenance. And the man turned the engine on, and all of our hands got ripped up. It was me and two other females because they had the females hold the cable. So my chief, who I said before, when we talked, my Chief Smith, who was an Italian skinny guy who's been demoted several times, and he didn't mind fighting anybody, but he ran up on him and told him that he'll knock him out if he ever messed with us again. That showed me there's I had somebody that on my side while I was down here, but he didn't mind talking about how he hated blacks, how he felt as though we shouldn't be in the service. Then he kicked it up a notch and said women shouldn't be in the military. And of course, me and him, we was chest bumping a couple times too, because I told him I'm going to stand my ground, and he will walk up on me. And I said, well, I'm not that kind of woman. I said, both of us is going to end up in the emergency room. So it didn't matter. So.
Wow. And that was not an isolated incident for you, Louise?
No, no, because it happened again when I got stationed in Australia. The first year was smooth. And then we got an XO who would run around and call us the N-word. And then we ended up having a captain come to the base and correct him. But I didn't like what the captain had turned around and did to us black women, because he told us that he desired black women. And Chief Galui helped me through that. And once again, another Italian chief, he helped me through that. And he was like, just stay away from him. I'll take the brunt of it. I tell him you busy, I'll give you something to do, so you stay away from him. But this man will come in and watch me doing aerobics and sit on the benches and stuff like that. But the man that actually used to call us the N-word, and I forget the other word he used to call us. I was trying to reach out to some of my military friends. It's a derogatory old name that they used to call people back in the 60s. But what he would do is call us that name and thought it was funny. So, but what he also did is created some tension, because then the Australians thought they could call us names. And one of the guys called me a boink. And I said, what the heck is a boink? And so when we went out on our basketball trip and I asked one of the Aborigines, that was the Australian term of calling me the N-word. So when I got back, me and him had it out, because I told him, you're not going to disrespect me like that. But of course, I was the one that got transferred from that site to another site because I confronted him.
So it's the Aborigine. That's right. The racism towards Aborigines in Australia was kind of transferred to you.
Yes.
And so how long were you in the Navy?
10 years.
10 years. So you endured 10 years as this. Did you see it change or get better, or not really?
No, I had white, and I had friends of all different races, because that's how I grew up. My family's also a melting pot. And so for me, it was just certain individuals, and those individuals I pulled myself away from. At least I tried it. If they had rank over me, then I found myself getting hostile towards them. So that was the one good thing about me being able to balance myself, that I didn't take it towards the whole race. I just said, well, you're just ignorant, you're stupid, and then I got to the point where if I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this because Todd, I'm a straightforward person, but if someone called me the N-word later on, what I would say, well, your mama's one. So I had to flip it on them so that I wouldn't get angry, so that they can get angry. But I refuse to blame a whole race, because just like the mom was saying before, every race has ignorant people in it. So I can't get myself caught up in anything like that, because then it makes me like them.
Wow. It just seems like an awful heavy burden to carry, to have to be the one. We were talking about this a little bit, I think before the show started, when you were on and Haya was talking, that part of the burden, I think, of being African American, and part of how racism works, is that you're always you're not always kind of sure where people are coming from, whether you're being judged or led down a garden path, or Or sometimes they make a joke and they say, well, it's only a joke, so you have to be the one to kind of, oh, you do say whether it's a joke or not. I mean, it's like all these little, again, go to the word microaggressions that kind of accumulate over time, and just the stress that it causes and the distress.
And also too, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but also too, one of the problems is that my name Louise Walker. So when people see Louise Walker, it's not this woman coming, like this Black 5'9" woman that's muscular, because I was a bodybuilder also in the service and I played basketball. So I was not what they expected to come to the base. So, you know, so that usually started the, you know, like that, the pushback right there, because I wasn't what they expected. So, but
Louise, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm sorry. What I was going to say is that one thing that I hope come out of this meeting is that, you know, and I shared this with you before, is that acknowledgement, acceptance, and change, you know, that people see us in a different light. And also the fact that I have to use my father's quote that I had lived by it. And one of the things he always said, he said, you know, and it goes for both sides. And that he said, if someone like stressed you, yeah, I got Black friends, and ask them how many been to your dinner table, you know, and here I can tell you how many different races, ethnicities, different people of different backgrounds, LGBT, all of them been to my house and even stayed the night.
Right. Wow. Louise, again, I'll say what I said to Lamont. I hope you don't go away, because we're going to be calling on you again. I want to get Haya, Eason, Haya, hello. Let's see here.
Hello.
Okay. Hello, Haya. I'm going to spotlight you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It was a pleasure hearing you sing a little bit before we all started here. You didn't know that your mic was on, and we heard a little. It reminded me how you led us in the national anthem when we were having our face-to-face meetings at Christ United Methodist Church in Bethel Park, and I haven't seen you since one of those.
Yes,
since we had one of those. So thank you for joining us tonight. You've come to our events for several years. You've
Yes,
told parts of your story. You joined the Marines in what year, Haya?
1981.
1981. And I have to say that, you know, you've been coming to our events, you've been sharing aspects of your story, but what I heard from you the other day was not like anything I'd heard from you before. And it was distressing to hear your story of your experiences in the Marine Corps. It sounds like you, like Louise, have kind of faced racism, racial discrimination really from the get-go when you joined the Marines. Is that true?
Yes, sir. Starting in boot camp.
Starting in boot camp.
There were. Let me say two things. One, the people I feel that fared best in boot camp were people that had relatives or someone in their community that kind of gave them inside information about how it worked. What to do, what not to do, you know, how to keep your nose clean, so to speak. Which is why I want to make the statement that my father was an infantry officer during the Korean War. Of his 6 children, none of them went in the military except for me. And I got no wisdom, no advice, no forewarning about what that was like. And that was troubling to me afterward. But maybe it was because he was male, but I think it was more so because of what he had experienced. I only asked my father once, what was your time in the military like? And he turned his face away from me and did not say anything else. So I don't know, and this is after I had been discharged, honorably discharged. So I don't know why he never shared any of his experience. I'm going to assume that he was an athlete in college. He had a degree. He was an officer, but I don't think he got any ounce of respect while he was there.
Maybe
so
he was hoping that it had changed.
I'm sorry?
Maybe he was hoping that it had changed since Korea?
You know, my mother was pretty hysterical, and my father was very centered and said, you know, let her go, because she will learn some responsibility and she'll learn how to take care of herself, and she may get an opportunity to travel. So he was more centered, but I still received no inside information, even though I was a female, which is what I thought was the reason why. But I don't think he thought he could share anything with me about his time in. No experience, good, bad, or indifferent. So when I talk about the military and my experience, I went in wide-eyed and just ready for whatever it had to offer. I was going to try to, do what was asked, and not even from a patriotic standpoint. But, in boot camp, there, I don't know why they picked on me. There were a couple of girls that called me into the back of the squad bay, during our free time. And one young lady blocked the door. And so I'm standing there looking at, first of all, you don't know me. Most of us don't know each other. And she started in on me about, she didn't like the way I was doing certain things. Now, she must not have known I was from Detroit, and I was pretty rough around the edges to begin with. So when I lit into her and pushed her out of the way, I pushed open the doors of this area, this secure area, and I'm walking up the squad bay, calling for the drill instructor. Well, guess who got office hours? I got office hours for being—
And office hours are punishment, right?
That's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, disciplinary action. And when I tried to explain to the lieutenant that they called me back there, I did not know what they wanted. It was the fight over, who was going to get the promotion out of boot camp and the dress blues, and I thought, what in the world? And again, because I had no information about pecking order and how how critical that is to people, that my response was the Detroit response. It was, no, you didn't. I'm walking up this squad bay and I'm gonna get somebody back here and they're gonna handle you. No, I was the one that did not get a chance. The officer that gave me office hours didn't even look at me. And I was too angry to cry because I couldn't believe it. It was like, no. And the people that fared well were the ones who had someone in their community or in their family to kind of give them the information. But I will tell you this, because you know my story about going in there behind a boyfriend that didn't finish boot camp in the first place. So I felt like, okay, well, I did what they asked me to do and I graduated. I had two Caucasian drill instructors and one African American. And I remember her looking at me on graduation day, like, you made it. Not just you passed the physical fitness test, not you learned how to drill, not you're wearing the uniform. It was like, you made it. And maybe that was my wisdom that I wished my father had given me, that was coming from her face saying, you made it. You made it through that, not just the Marine Corps challenge, but the human challenge of different people's different views concerning you and their lack of faith in you.
It was an affirmation and a validation of your experience.
Yes.
And did it stop? It sounds like it didn't end with boot camp though. Like with Louise, it kept, how long? 6 years in the Marine Corps? 4 years?
9 years, sir.
9 years. You did 9 years.
Yes, sir.
Did that kind of thing happen over and over 9 years?
Let me just sum it up, because this isn't a discussion on gender, but the people who went before the meritorious boards had more cleavage. The people who there were other things that were done to get ahead, so to speak.
I get it.
I mean, we're all adults on this chat, but let me just sum up my very last day on active duty. 2 years before I got out, I re-enlisted for retention on station. And so they put you with a unit who either just came back from overseas, and so they're not getting ready to travel. So you're really just kind of, doing the remainder of your time until it's time for you to get out. There was a model Marine, And when I say model Marine, he looked like he had just come off of the drill field. He looked like he had just come off of the drill field. He stood around with his hands on his hips and paraded most of the day. You know, I have to tell you, I couldn't stand him, you know, just because I was on my way out, and not that I was disrespectful to him, but we were both sergeants. He was senior, but we were both sergeants, and he didn't respect me at all. I took what's called terminal leave, which is your accumulated leave. You can leave active duty, but not officially until all of your leave has been consumed. And I had come in on the weekends. I had worked through lunch. I had stayed there late in the evenings, because in administration, you were either preparing for an inspection or you were correcting the errors, and they were going to come back and do a re-inspection. And the very last day, you know, I straightened up my area, and you let people know what's pending, and you say your goodbyes. And I'm gonna try to do this without crying, because I was 27. You know, I had a work ethic that my parents gave me, that the military only enhanced. I had it when I came. That's why my conduct was always 4.2 and my proficiency was always 4.9. And that's really what kind of kept me afloat in the military, because people said, you know, she'll light into you like a firecracker, but that sister will work. You know, and that's what happened. And you know, when I became a Christian, I did settle down some, which is probably why this hurt more than anything else, is because when you said you're trying to figure out why you are hated, I couldn't figure out if he said, I'm going to tell you what he said, but I couldn't figure out if he said it because I was Black. I don't know if he said it because I was female, and I don't know if he said it because I was Christian, but he was so angry that I was taking my leave and not staying there for the return inspection team. I was walking out the door, and he said, I hope you crash and die.
Oh my gosh.
And little did I know I was going to be living in the state that he's from. Yes, your head went back, Miss Lauren. Yes. When I found out I was coming to Pennsylvania, I said, and he is from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And it was crushing then, and it's crushing now, because it was, I don't care that the 9 years you served, I don't care about you as a human being. This is my Marine Corps. How dare you leave and not fulfill your obligation? How dare you do that? And what made him think he could walk me to the door and then say, I hope you crash and die?
Haya, you have many other stories. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here. I'm going to read a little bit of something that you wrote to me in an email, and I hope you don't hate me for this, but it was very touching, and it had an impact on me. You said about how you missed our VBC events. You said, I miss learning, laughing, and crying at VBC events. They're informative and engaging. You know, the older veterans, you miss them. You miss your time in the camaraderie with the veterans. And you said, I've found a lot of courage to be who I am while working on who I want to become. I now know how to tell my stories without feeling burdened by shame and dismissal. Mm-hmm. Is that how your stories have been met over the years, with a kind of dismissal?
And I used that word intentionally, because even now when I tell people, when they say, oh, well, what branch were you in? And I'll say Marines, and they go, oh, so there's an eyebrow raise, because that's not the wimpy branch. Not that any of them are.
You hear that, Lamont?
We all heard that.
They fall under the Department of the Navy, so it's all good. We're family. We're family.
So no, it wasn't. It's like, okay, well, you're in the Marine Corps, so one eyebrow goes up. Well, how long were you in? And I said, well, 9 years. Then the other eyebrow goes up. And then they say, well, what did you do? And I said, well, I was in administration. Then it goes back to 0. Because people don't see that getting someone paid correctly and on time for themselves and for their families and getting them transferred to a base when they're supposed to be there for the duration, doing discharge paperwork, processing medical discharges, processing people who are conscientious objectors. All these different facets of administration make it so that you can do whatever else you want to do in the military. And when the smoke and dust clears, we're putting together the numbers and the reports to send off to Headquarters Marine Corps.
Right.
So people don't respect that as well. So that's kind of been a dismissal as well.
Right.
You know, I wasn't in combat, and I wasn't in a like I don't want to say like the Marine Corps band. And I bet people in the Marine Corps band get that as well. You know what I'm saying?
Because I do. Yes. We hear it all the time.
You didn't fight.
Right.
You didn't really earn,
right.
your stripes. And it's like, well, yes, I did.
Yeah. Thank you, Haya. Thank you for sharing your story. And I hope you do stay around, because I think we're going to have a lot of questions. And I want to go to another Marine. Might as well get this Marine stuff over with. Let's go to James Martin. Hey, James, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm all right. Yourself?
Good. I'm doing very well. And, you and I have had several conversations about the experience of race in the Marine Corps. I think our first conversation was in January, where we were at an event together and we got into a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it was what you told me, in all frankness, was something that kind of I've, remembered and have been thinking about ever since. And that was kind of a lot of what Lamont has said, that there is this pattern to racism and racial discrimination in the Marine Corps, at least from your experience. And it works a little differently from the junior enlisted ranks than the senior enlisted ranks. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I like to say that when it came to racial inequalities, or even things of sexism that came in the military, it was a huge difference between the E5 and below and E6 and above. With E5 and below, it was kind of in your face. You weren't going to miss it. If somebody didn't like you because of the color of your skin or your nationality, or if you're a woman or something like that, 20 to 1 it was going to be in your face. They had, at least in the Marine Corps, they had very little reserve, not that great a filter. They're going to let you have it. So if you felt some sort of way because I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, and I look like 1,000-pound gorilla, you had no problem telling me, and I was okay with that. If you didn't like me being in your neck of the woods or whatever, and you want to hit me with the N-word, it flew just as fluently as we were talking. But at the end of the day, whether I liked you or not, or you didn't like me because you thought that I should be hanging off of your back porch and you made it abundantly clear, I had a job to do. It doesn't matter. The sergeant above us, the staff sergeant's coming down and he's telling us, hey, look, this got to get done, this got to get done, this got to get done, and y'all are going to do it. So what choice do you have? I have examples of that just in the fact of, like, in my first 4 years, the unit I was with, they didn't like me very much. I wasn't too fond of them either. And so our displeasantries went greatly. And they decided one way to get at me was to punish me by making me switch my barracks room. And I didn't know that they were going to put me in with the Texan with golden gloves hands and a local boy from Butler, actually no, from Irwin, who was racist enough to have pictures and swastikas, all sorts of that. And so they thought it'd be funny. Hey, let's move the black guy over there. They'll fix him. They'll teach him. And what they didn't realize was that, one, my grandmother, in like elementary school, I remember somebody called me the N word and made me pull out a dictionary and understand that that's actually defined in Webster's as an ignorant and vulgar person. So she was like, I've taught you better than this. I've taught you how to speak, how to work from, how to talk in a boardroom, how to talk on a street corner. You can show them if you want them. If they're asking permission to see what one is, don't be ashamed to show them, and then understand that, like, look, you came to me, you called me this word. This is what it means, which means you're dumb enough to use it and you're ignorant and vulgar in your own language to use it against me. But if you're trying to use it in a derogatory term, I have no problem showing you exactly how bad I can be. How bad do you want this work? And so they moved me into that room, and the first 5 minutes, the guy was like, no, you can't have this rack. No, you can't have this wall locker. This is that and other. And I was like, all right, that's fine. I'll just keep everything in a sea bag. No, you have to put it over here. Okay, you know what? Let's just go ahead and fight this out. And he snatched me up. He called me an N-word. And when he woke up off the floor with his friend trying to figure out how he ended up there, we had an understanding. I'll be whatever you want, but you're going to see these hands. So, and that's the E5. And look, you see how everybody up there is laughing? That's that E5 and below mentality. It doesn't matter how you feel about me. We could take this out to the tree line. We could work this out like men, and I'll show you what one is. But when it's time to go to work, I got things I got to do. So for that was that way. And then you start noticing people coming in and getting promoted or getting moved in places, and sometimes it didn't make sense. And it was like you saw what we call the good old boys network. So again, my mother having an incredible work ethic, my grandmother teaching me a whole lot, said always make yourself important. Don't ever pass up a case to get educated, because at some point, all those people that hate you, when you're the only person who knows how to do the job, they're going to need you. And there you have it. So there was times, even like Mr. Gordine was saying, that when it came to fit rep time, and they had to write your reviews, as I'm sitting here with a book going, hey, you sent me to 16 different units over the course of 6 months because I was the only one that could do the job, versus all those people that you're loving and putting on boards. Remember me then. So
you're saying that the racism is more explicit in the junior enlisted grades, but then when you start getting into the senior, you said E5 and above, or E6 and above?
E5 and below. So E1, E2, so private, PFC, Lance Corporal,
Okay.
Corporal, Sergeant.
So
it's a whole different ball game.
ball game. And how does it change above that?
Above that, that's when, as we said about the uncertainties. So it's time for promotion. We know the numbers, and much like Mr. Henry said, to be a black pilot, that's far and few in between. To be
Right.
a black operations chief in artillery, we can count them usually on one hand.
Okay.
And there may be 100 of us, but there may only be 5 or 6 of color, enough that we're calling each other and being like, hey, when you go to this duty station, be careful of X, Y, and Z. Hey, you represent all of us, not us, the artillery community, not us, the ops chiefs, us, the few, the proud, the few black folks that are in this position.
Right.
You represent all of us. So here's what you're not going to do. And here's the things to look forward to. And here's the things you got to be aware of. And you had to walk a fine line. There's a mask that you have to wear and an extra language you have to learn in order to walk in these rooms and not get discounted. As Hyatt said, I'd walk in there at my, you see the sun's got me, so I'm a little dark. I'm starting not to see my beard in the reflection of the camera. So, I'm 6'2", and all of a sudden they're like, what's this black guy doing here? And then I speak, and oh wait, he's a staff sergeant. Oh wait, he's got first class PFT, excellent on the rifle range, this, that, another. Oh, he knows his job. Oh, he's far from stupid. I have to prove myself, just like Haya said. I'm watching her hands do the same thing I did. every single. So, oh wait, he's not just a black guy, but he's educated. Oh wait, he's not just dumb. He knows his job. Oh, he knows what he's talking about. Oh, he can work the room. It takes a whole lot of effort. And then you watch some guy that couldn't put on his camis last week and failed to make height and weight, and all of a sudden he got gunny. How'd that work? How'd that work? That's a good one. I like to see how he pulled that one off.
You said he couldn't put on his candies. Sometimes we use acronyms and
his camouflage.
Oh, camis. Okay.
Yeah, like almost like that he put on Spanx for that Fit Red picture. He didn't do that by himself.
It's a really
Somebody hooked him up.
affectionate name, like fat bodies or something awful that they call people that were out of parameters, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, there's a term white privilege, and I think it's a useful one because as a white man who really I've not experienced discrimination, I always think that the greatest privilege of whiteness is not having to think about race, not having to think about the things that you think about always. You're always assessing, am I being judged because of my race? Am I being judged on my performance? Not knowing that kind of uncertainty you have to live with.
And Hi being admin, she understands this wholeheartedly. So you can pull up the stats on an individual real quick. You can see them all, because if we're all getting promoted at the same time, you could look and say, okay, there's this guy, here goes his cutting score. So a cutting score is what you need to be at the minimum to be up to the next rank. Anything above it, you get promoted. Anything below it, not so much. But after that certain point when you have to go in front of boards, where it's a selection,
right?
You could sit here and look at the math and go, okay, so I have a 295 average PFT, give or plus and minus a few. Oh, he's a 250. I haven't shot on the rifle range for 3 years because I shot expert every time I walk on the door. So, after so long, you get, extensions. Like, I don't have to shoot. I've shown that I can do this. And you're walking around with the pizza box. Like, how'd you pull that? Like, how'd you really pull this off? And then you go, wait a minute, that's right, he's connected with those people, or those, he's in good with the commanding officer and his group of folks, and okay.
You see how
now
it goes.
Now I see it.
I thank you, James. And again, I want to leave some time for Q&A. So I hope you'll hang around with us, because I think we're going to have a lot of questions. But I want to get a voice of, I guess I would call it a voice of history here, Rosetta Burke. We're honored to have Rosetta be joining us. Rosetta, I'm looking for you. There you are. Hello, Rosetta. Good to see you. I'm so glad that you joined us. I'm going to unmute. Okay, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. You are Major General Rosetta Burke, and you are the first Assistant Adjutant General in the National Guard who's a woman. And I had understood that you were the first female Major General in the National Guard, but you corrected me. So
yes,
no.
Let me correct you again.
Okay. Yes. You say it better. You'll say it better.
I'm actually an assistant adjutant general. There are different areas where generals are put into place, and I'm in the assistant adjutant general. That's the where I was promoted to, and I was promoted as a brigadier general.
You were promoted as a brigadier general.
Okay. Right. I became a major general at my retirement because the adjutant general who would have promoted me had I been able to stay beyond my 60 years of age thought that I would be a major general anyway, because you're promoted to the rank that you merit. You're already doing the job. You're not being promoted to do the job. You're doing the job, and therefore they put the rank on you. So right, you have to go before that board. That's what he was talking about. And you have to show that you have punched all those holes in your belt. And you have to show that you're already in that job for them to give you the promotion to that job. So I was promoted in the state of New York as a major general, and it's called a brevet. In other words, it's an honorarium, similar to what you would get in a college and get your doctorate or whatever else. In the military, they do brevets.
A brevet, right. You joined the Army or National Guard in 1962, and you retired in 1997, 35 years?
Yes.
Wow, is that a fascinating span of history? I mean, you joined at the height of the civil rights movement. Pretty much 62. I mean, 63, but March on Washington, Summer March on Washington.
Yes, yes.
It was right
yes.
when all that was really coming to the national forefront, had been for some time. What has been your experience as a Black woman serving in the National Guard?
Well, I have two differences. One, that it was mainly in the reserves and the National Guard. I did 30 years in the reserves and 5 years in the National Guard. I was not on active duty.
Okay.
And there's a caste class system throughout the military total. Those who are on the reserve side or in the National Guard had differences thought about them if they were not on active duty. If you didn't go overseas, you were not considered really military. You were a weekend warrior. So there was a caste class system with the active duty against the reserves. There was also a problem with the reserves against the National Guard. So you have to know that there's differences all the way through. And there's also differences in reference to the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force. And there used to be the tease that the Marines came in the mud, the Navy came on the boat, both of them saying this sucks. The Army came on the ground in a tent saying this sucks, and the Air Force was up in a tree with a TV with the antenna, the rabbit ears, with a fan saying this sucks.
The best thing I've ever heard. Thank you so much for that, Rosetta.
Rosetta, could you relate to some of the stories that we've heard so far, or are they outside your experience? You can?
Yes, because it's not only on active duty, it was in the active duty against those reservists that were coming to relieve the active duty people, because that would be our 2 weeks. We would go to a area where the active duty people needed R&R, rest and relaxation from the job that they were doing. I came in as a nurse, and so that was the difference. I came in as a first Louis, and the 2 weeks that I would go to camp would be to Benning or wherever there were active duty people on that had a hospital that were doing their duty, and we would do 2 weeks for them to be able to get off and at least get some rest and relaxation.
Right.
And of course, when they came back, they were swearing that we hadn't done our job right, when indeed we were doing both the regular job on civilian life as well as going to military and doing the same job that we did in our civilian time.
Right. Oh, how wonderful. Just to hear this voice, when you joined in 1962, could you ever have imagined that you would have risen to brigadier general?
No way.
No way.
No, as a matter of fact, I came into the military to get the rest of my education. I had already been a nurse for 5 years. But that counted against me, because if they give you rank ahead of time, then they counts against you to say for you to stay in until you are able to retire. So that retainment is another ball game that goes against you, depending on how many years you want to stay in and actually do retirement.
Right. Rosetta, I hope you'll continue with us, and we want to get to questions. We have one more veteran I want to have speak, and that is Ariana Behringer White. Oh, there you are. Hello, Ariana. Good to see you tonight.
Hi, Todd.
I thought I'd save you for last because you have kind of an interesting story. I think you've come to many of our events. You've told your story in many different ways. You've told your story as a woman, but you're African American. But you didn't necessarily identify as African American when you were in the Army.
No, and actually, so it's funny because it's probably only been since I'm an adult, like a real adult, not a 20-something adult, that I have identified as a Black woman. So my dad's Black and my mom is white. I always knew I was different. I always knew that I was an other, but I was always afraid of identifying one way or the other because I was never accepted by other. So if I said I was Black, oftentimes I wouldn't be considered Black enough to be with Black people. Or if I said I was white, white people would look at me and go, but are you really? So yeah, it's been one of those things that while my dad growing up would say to me, you have one drop of Black in you, you are Black, that I was afraid of really being who I am until I got old enough to not give to care anymore, right?
Right. Now, when you were in the Army, did you see, racial discrimination, racism? Did you observe it? Did you experience it at all?
I did, and it's interesting because I experienced it on a number of different levels, right? So, they often say that the military is a microcosm of society at large. Yeah. And so when it came time to get promoted, so I got out as an E4, but when we just got back from Iraq, there were 3 of us who were PFCs, who were E3s, like nothing in the really grand scheme of things, let's be honest, no brigadier general for that matter. But, that was a really important promotion for me. And as we stood there, the 2 white men who I know I worked harder than, who I know I outshot at the range, who I know I worked midnight shifts and, did every duty that no one else wanted to do, got promoted before me. And I didn't know if that was because I was a woman or if that was because I was a Black woman or a woman of color or just an other. And, I didn't let it get me down. I got promoted very shortly thereafter, but it was something that I always thought about. And I feel like I'm echoing so much of what other people have said tonight, right? I think about now, like we talk about today, and the Navy banning the Confederate flag, which I'm so happy to hear and ecstatic that our military is again kind of leading the way in this fashion. I can remember being on CQ, which is charge of quarters, which is you're working 24 hours in the middle of the barracks, and it's a Saturday night and no one wants to do that job on a Saturday night anyway, because you're watching all your friends go out to the bar and you get to sit there and not have fun. To get called to shut the music off in someone's room at 2 a.m. that's being way too loud and is waking everybody up. And I knock on that door as an E-nothing with my staff sergeant, let's be honest. I don't know where he was. I'm pretty sure he was like sleeping on a toilet in a bathroom somewhere to not have to do duty. But like knock on that door and be greeted with a Confederate flag hanging on the wall and being told to get the F out of here, you N-word, right? And being young and not knowing what to do and being afraid. I'm like, I was sometimes, I've heard this before, right? Like I was more afraid sometimes in my own unit than being deployed to Iraq, because I didn't know what those people I was serving with who didn't like me just for the color of my skin were going to do to me versus being deployed. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about when you're 20 years old, and prior to that not really recognizing that you maybe were a little bit different than everybody else.
It's a hard slap in the face, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Hard that you never forget.
For sure.
Never forget. Thank you, Ariana. I have so many questions for all of you, and one of them is, if you, I think I would like to think that the military has something to teach the civilian world about race relations and racial discrimination. I hope that that's still true. I think it's still true. But I want to open up, that's one of my questions. So if you want to reflect on that, or if our speakers want to reflect on that, that would be great. But I also want to open up to questions that people here on the Zoom side and also on the Facebook Live side. I know there are people commenting on Facebook Live. They could certainly, we could certainly have Lauren or Ellie relay some comments there, some questions there. Does anybody here have a question? You could just raise your hand. I could see you all if you have a question, or for our guests.
Rick Arisman wants to know, Ariana, what race did you check on your enlistment paper? Rick is a good friend of the VBC on the Facebook side.
Rick, I always, to this day, I select 2. I select Black and white. If it only allows me to select one, I select Black.
Thank you. And one for James Martin. James, there's only one person in the world that can shoot better than you. You said you're an expert rifleman. And who is that person?
My wife is a better shot than me.
And why is your wife a better shot? You told me the other day.
This is funny because Ariana knows this as well. And before I forget, Rosetta, I love you. I appreciate you. You are my hero. All right, clean this one up. So I was on the rifle range one day, and we were shooting qualifications, and a bunch of our country folks, our white guys were coming up and talking trash to these girls, these ladies, and they were up there, they were shooting, and they were like, "Oh, well, she's not gonna make it. She's not gonna make it. She's not gonna make it." And I'm like, you do know that scientifically, women have a lower resting heart rate. And they're like, "Yeah, we know that." I'm like, "Okay." So you understand that everything that they teach us to shoot, calm down, breathe, sight picture, sight alignment, slow, steady squeeze on the trigger, because we are men, we have a natural pull every time. We have to teach ourselves to do it. Women have been doing it since birth, which means she can pull that trigger better than you could if you tried. And this girl heard me. She was an E4. She heard me. I was like, "Go show them who you are." One of the junior Marines that was talking trash failed the rifle range. A couple of them walked out. Middle of range. Marksman shooters. She walked out 4 points away from expert, and this was after we did the redo of the rifle range where you had to do table 2. So she came in through and just cleaned up shop, and I was like, "All y'all, before we march back and take our rifles back, there better be an apology." And from that point on, she was socially accepted in an artillery unit, which was hard to do because it was bad enough to be a person of color, but to be a person of color and a female, I couldn't. I don't know if even I did that dance. I'd have got kicked out a long time ago at that rate. And I made all of them apologize, and they took her out to drinks like she was the hit of the show for like 2 years straight because of that. And somebody just said it. Some of the best Israeli snipers are women. Absolutely.
That was the commander. Go ahead, Commander.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I was just chiming in on that because I had the opportunity to work with the Israelis for a little while, and definitely they are highly skilled at killing people. So that was the only thing, just to chime in on what he said. That's definitely a fact.
Do we have any other questions out there? Any of our guests want to have questions for the guest who spoke today? Yes, Linda. Linda, let me unmute you here. Here we go. Oh, hello, Linda Jordan. How are you? It's good to see you. I couldn't recognize you from you in your car. I'm trying to unmute Linda here. Ellie, could you help me out? There we go. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
There, we got you.
Okay. Now, what I am going to say, this is the way I feel about from the very beginning. When they segregated the military forces, just like in the military, they got bolts, screws, and all these, they always have a checklist. I mean, I don't care. You have to go down. If you use that checklist, let me tell you, you could actually get wrote up for not using this. One thing I noticed about segregation, they desegregated the military as a whole. They never followed with any procedures or checklists or anything. So basically, they just pushed it out there and said, make it work. Which I hate to say this, 90% of the time in the military and armed services, if you put something out there and tell them to make it work, it's going to work right at all. It's going to work the way they want to do it, not the way it should be done.
And go ahead.
Well, what I want to finish with is fact that racism was built right after they desegregated. Because the fact of the matter is the leadership was basically the good old boys. So they were going to make it just the way they wanted it to be. They was going to make it hard. They were going to make it nerd. They were going to do whatever. They actually, for the 35 years I was in, they did everything to make me leave to stay.
35 years. You were in 35 years. Wow.
Yes, I was in the Guard for 33, which I want to tell people something about the Guard. At least on active duty, somewhere around the 4 to 6 years, you change bases. And you are with these people from the time you're with their family members, you're with their grandchildren. I mean, nothing changes. And when they're bad people, got a good old boy working like they got out at the Pennsylvania Air National Guard base, 90% of them people went nowhere. And you had all kinds of problems getting promoted. No matter how good you were, no matter how they say most people were beyond capable, qualified for jobs, but they just weren't getting them.
Right. And that's what you said about segregation and desegregation is true. And some of our audience here, our listeners, our viewers will know that it was on July 26th, 1948, that President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, desegregating the military. And I guess I had always thought that this was like, stroke of the pen, desegregation. It wasn't like that at all. It took about 6 years. Just like you said, there was no procedure for how to go about desegregating the military. And that meant that that old boy network and every branch of service just fought it and fought it and fought it for 6 years,
Well,
before
actually,
it happened.
I don't mean to interrupt, Todd. They're still fighting it. And on a lot of Guard bases, they are still fighting. What they have done is they have turned it into, if you ever look it up, industrialized racism and using stereotypes.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, industrialized racism, like say you have a job, like I was in transportation. Say I want to move up into another field or whatever it is. And by the military regulation, supposed to at least give you a chance to do so, go to school, whatever it is. Well, they decided to make a board for that. So when the board didn't want you to leave working at, and I mean, I hate to say this, my job was one step. I want to make this quick. My pay was one step up from the janitor and one step down from the cook. And we ran the whole, believe it or not.
How about that? Wow. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for kind of bearing witness to your experience, 35 years in the Pennsylvania National Guard. Do we have any other kind of comments like that, stories, questions, again, that people might have? James, hello, how are you?
So I'm watching my brother, he's on Facebook right now. And it's kind of funny because he can attest to this, Myron Ellis. So for my second deployment was his first. And as Ariana said, whenever you had those units where you didn't feel comfortable, you didn't feel safe in your own skin, you knew they were always trying to find a way to get you. It was interesting to go to Myron's unit, and in the Marine Corps, you'll find a lot of your people of color, motor T, supply, but you won't see them past like E6, E7. They kind of fall away at that point.
Yeah.
But I went to the unit, Alpha Battery 110, whole lot of people of color there. First sergeant, battery guns. Most of our section chiefs, if they weren't of color, the majority of the guns had the crew itself was of color. And I know when I got there, I was like, thank you, Jesus. I'm around thank you, because it had got hard by this point. We're talking, 5 years in by this point, and I still talked to a few Marines that were with me in that first unit that were like, first off, we're amazed that you stayed past 4 years. Second of all, that you made E6, because we did everything we could to try to get rid of you, to try to make sure that you didn't make it. And there's like that we knew this. So to go to a unit like that was incredible. It was enlightening. It was beautiful to see our people together, but it was in small doses. If you looked across the entire Marine Corps, it wasn't always like that. You may have found it was almost like finding a speckle of pepper in a sea full of salt. So to find a unit where 75% of 175 people are people of color or who are allies of it, that's a whole different ballgame. That was a whole different monster. Like, you couldn't tell us nothing. And I think we talked about it on the meeting before this. If you'd have seen us, you'd have thought that we were a registered gang. First Sergeant walking with an AT-4 in country because he didn't trust nobody. Battery guns walking around with the saw, and all his corporals, sergeants, lance corporals, the whole 9 yards. I'm looking, and there was still racism there, but we ran because we were together, and because we were in the positions of power to at least look out for each other. That changed the game, but it wasn't going to help us get promoted. It wasn't going to help us elevate to the next level, but at least we had each other.
It was going to relieve the stress. I mean, it was going to be a less stressful situation. It sounds like you could relax a little bit. Don't have to worry about how you're being judged or punished or not. Oh, we have a blue hand raised. I'm sorry about that. Let me see here. Blue hand.
It's Louise. Oh God, poor Louise is waving away, and I'm gabbing away. Okay, hold on, Louise. I got to unmute you. You unmuted?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
All right. So what I wanted to say is that, when you talked about the desegregation of the military, just think about this, even though it was desegregated, you still didn't hear about the significant things that African Americans did. Like, growing up, I didn't hear about the Marines from Monty Point. I didn't hear about the Harlem Hellraisers. You heard about the Tuskegee Airmen, a couple years ago. Dory Miller just got recognition. So just think of all the things that we have done in the military that we never got credit for. All you hear about is, General Custer or whatever the case may be. I don't want to get into detail with all them, but I'm just saying for us, it just was not mentioned, of all these people that made a big impact on wartime. I mean, think about it. Slavery, they was fighting the Revolutionary War. Like, who does that? But, these are things to think about. And one of the things I wanted to bring light to is that today's military, it has these young people in it. And I think it's the young generation that's going to change this because they're more accepting of everything and everyone. They don't have this, a lot of them don't have this malice and hate. You can see that as they're walking through the streets.
Believe me, Louise, I have 2 daughters. I know what you're saying. Yeah. They're different. Dan Steitner, here, let me spotlight you. Hello, Dan. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Good. Oh, this is one of the best presentations I've ever seen you do tonight. This is awesome. So
I'll take full credit for it, Dan. Thank you.
I have a question for the panel, but I met you in 2017 because I was coming to the VBC event because I was the chairman of the Air Force All Parents, the All Service Academies Ball and the Air Force, and we were bringing in the Tuskegee Airmen for the event. And I learned a lot that year fundraising and trying to get people to participate. A couple comments, and one of the questions I want to ask, like a different type of bigotry question in a second, but on my group of, I'm a little nervous because I want to make sure, my wife says, be careful what you say, think first, and don't say something. So,
always listen to your wife, Dan. Always listen to your wife.
So, we love you, Dan. We love you.
On our board, we had, it was all, I'll be honest, it was all white individuals. A lot of the parents were from the Air Force. First, I was surprised the lack of knowledge of history. A lot of people did not know who the Tuskegee Airmen were. I found that interesting. And also, soft bigotry is like, for example, we had General Goodwin, who was one of the first openly gay female generals come in, and I had some comments made to me about, why she shouldn't be there. And one lady who was very prominent, felt that women should not even be in the military. But here's one of the questions. I was shocked or surprised, and I reach out to very many African-American organizations and say, hey, we got these Tuskegee Airmen coming in, and we have, because Swickley has the memorial. I don't know if all of you know this, but there's a memorial in Swickley dedicated to Tuskegee Airmen. And it's still owed, there's some money owed on it, and we raise money to pay off that debt. The lack of interest from a lot of like prominent organizations, African-American organizations, of even having these Tuskegee Airmen here for an event. Have you ever seen that because you went in the military that other African-Americans thought you were, should not be in the military, or you ever get like pushback?
I can say, can I speak? I could definitely answer you on both parts of that. So I belong to ASALH, was the African-American, I always mess this up. It's the study of African-American history. And we actually was at the Tuskegee Airmen site, and we actually do talk about it. And one of the gentlemen who's actually buried out there, his son actually works for WTAE. He's like the supervisor of the, anyway, I can't remember. But anyway, ASALH is a group that you might want to reach out to. I can get you the information to that, Ron Saunders, and also OGS, which is the African American Geological Society. So those are two Black groups that I know that are very, they're in the community, and they participate in a lot of things. Your second question, what was that again? I'm sorry, I got so excited about that.
Do you ever have like pushback from other African Americans that you went into the military that thought that you shouldn't be there, or that organizations I talked to, they showed no interest at all?
Well, I'm the first female in my family to go into the military. I have a long list of family members that's been in the military. I'm the first female. The first thing was said to me, don't go to the Marines, you'll be gay. Because that was my first pick. And I was like, I'm still leaving. I don't care what you do. So I ended up going to the Navy, following my uncle in there. And out of everybody, I stayed in the longest, which is crazy. I did 10 years. But now I got a son that actually went to the Marines. But yes, I did get a lot of pushback. And they always, and a lot of people always said the military is not for Black people. And, at times I did feel like that. As I said, at times I did feel like that, because of the negativity that you receive, and all of us, I'm sure, can identify. At some point we was told we were dumb, we weren't smart enough. Even though I sit here before you with 4 degrees, it's like I still get it, that you're not intelligent, you're still not this, even out here in the private world. So it's just something that we just deal with. That I know the people that I talk to, we just deal with it, and we just keep on pushing. But actually, I took that and I raised my kids and told them use that as their footstool.
Louise, thank you.
Hey, Todd, can I add a little bit to that?
Yes, absolutely.
So Dan, I have a question for you, because you said that you reached out to these affinity groups about coming in, talking about the Tuskegee Air.
Well, no, I said, hey, we were having, we had 3 gentlemen come in. We were able to get like General McGee just got promoted, and we were trying to pay off the memorial in Swickley, PA, because there was $100,000 in debt. Our goal was to help pay off that memorial, to pay it off. And then we were, it was the ball, and we just want, opportunity to meet these people, to because we actually that day had or day before, we had at the hotel, we had a meet and greet. We had over 200 people come and meet these people, but there were certain organizations that and a prominent business owner, just like, there was no like interest. It was, they didn't want to attend or come or even meet these people or acknowledge anything. And I just thought,
do you have insight?
Well, I'll say one of the things is that and Dan, I love you. I'll say this: if you didn't reach out to these organizations prior to, then they probably felt a little bit offended at the fact that, okay, now we're trying to do something. So it's like, okay, we're having this challenge, so now we're going to reach out, but we didn't reach out to you before, but now we're reaching out to you. So they may have thought that I'm not quite sure. I applaud you for reaching out to them, because I think, and you said you work with the, like the Service Academy. You said All Service Academy
It was
organization?
the All Service Academy Ball. It was in Navy did it in 2016. We did it in 2017. So, and we had record attendance. We had over 350 people come, and we raised 80,000. We were able to give $40,000 to charity away, and and it was awesome. My daughter got. We had these gentlemen were awesome, and they came in from Florida and Maryland, and I can't think of the third state at the time, but they came all over. So
I think sometimes unfortunately, if you when you reach out to some organizations, and it kind of goes back to just being in the military too. It's like, okay, what angle exactly are you coming at? I don't know. I'm confused. You never asked me for anything before. Now you're asking me.
Oh.
So it makes it a little bit of a challenge sometimes when it happens like that. But
I'm sorry, Lamont. Sorry, Dan. I don't want to interrupt you, but we are past our time. So I just want to, I'd just say as a maybe as an analogy, Lamont, maybe it's something like this. If I only asked you to come on in February for Black History Month, you know what I mean? And then you didn't hear from me. You didn't hear from me the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I think that happens. I asked you guys to be on this program because we're talking about the African American experience. I didn't ask you to be on Wednesday or last week, and I guess I just want to close with that emphasis that I would like this to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing part of kind of what we discuss here at the Veterans Breakfast Club. We've discussed it here and there over the years, but I hope this is a conversation that continues. I'm just looking at the calendar, July 26th. Boy, that would be a great day to mark the official desegregation of the U.S. military. Before we leave, I know Rosetta wants to let you know about an organization that's near and dear to her heart. Hello, Rosetta.
Yes, I wanted to let you know about the Black Military Women Foundation. It's been increasing its website. If you go on the blackmilitarywomenfoundation.org, and you see the contributions that we're trying to let other people know about, because they don't know about us. And that's some of the reason why it made me higher that your father didn't say anything, was because it hurt. Yes, it might have hurt him too hard to explain what he went through. One of the ways that I met this organization, the National Association of Black Military Women, which is total of the United States, because we have Black women in every state, but not everybody joins it because they don't know about us. And I didn't know about them until 1998. This is 2020, and we're still building because people don't know about us. And it takes a long time to make an organization to actually be full functioning so that people will come and join. And when we say that it's a Black military women's organization, doesn't mean that you have to be a Black and you don't have to be a woman. We take everybody that supports our goals.
Exactly. You'll take volunteers. You'll take
everybody's
money, donations. Right. I want to ask Libby and Ellie, could you put the website to the Black Military Women Foundation here on the Zoom side in the chat and on the Facebook comment side so that people connect to it and connect to you, Rosetta, if they'd like to. Thank you so much for pitching that. And I just want to say one more thing. Myron Ellis was going to be a guest tonight, and he had a class that had an exam tonight. I know that he's on the Facebook side watching and listening and commenting, and he had something to add. And I want to have Myron. Myron's a Marine. He's a good guy anyhow. I had to say that. Sorry about that. Myron's a Marine, and he said that he got pushback from his family for joining the Marine Corps, and that when he got wounded in combat, they were glad because they thought he'd get out immediately. I want to have Ellis on, Myron Ellis on sometime and maybe share that story and other stories. And I hope I'll see everyone, all our guests. I want to thank all our guests. Rosetta, thank you very much for joining us. Lamont, thank you.
Here we go. We have Linda Jordan. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your story. Haya and James and Louise. Boy, this is a wonderful conversation and a wide-ranging one. You know, we have a tradition of ending our programs with song. Usually it's with the God Bless America. We've started a new little tradition here in the virtual environment by having Irmgard Ryan, who lived through World War II on the German side. And boy, here we are, Irmgard, in a conversation about race in the military, and we're having a former member of the Hitler Youth lead us in song. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but Irmgard, I love you. And you're a wonderful accordion player. And for everybody, this is Irmgard Ryan, grew up in Germany, lived through World War II, has a tremendous story that she shared with us here on Zoom side and over the years at our Veterans Breakfast Club event. Married an American GI, came to the United States and brought had an accordion sent to her, and used to play kind of traditional German drinking songs and other songs to end us. What are you going to play for us tonight?
Well, first I have to say something to add. This conversation tonight awoke a memory, and I never thought much about it. When the American forces occupied my country, and in 45 and 46, I'm speaking of those first 2 years, the white forces, the white soldiers lived in the adjoining city, in the city. And you know where the black men, the black soldiers, lived in the woods. They didn't even have tents. They lived in the woods. Wow. And I never thought about it until tonight. I didn't know why that was, but it gives you maybe something to think about. But I have a suggestion. Could we save my cute little song that I had in mind? Since we're running way late, till next week, I will do the Lorelei for Lou.
Okay, thank you, Irmgard. And thank you for, yes, we will hold you to that, to sharing your song next time. And thank you for sharing that awful memory of the end of the war in Europe. I want to thank again our guests. I want to thank all of you for listening on the Facebook side, on the Zoom side. I do hope you join us for our Korean War commemoration and stories from Korean War veterans on Wednesday, June 24th at 1 p.m. And then, of course, for our VBC